Life is a video game. Everybody's got to die sometime. This is what Devin Moore said when he was asked why he shot 2 police officers and then escaped in their patrol vehicle. This is just one of the many examples of teen and grown adult violence and how it correlates with violent video games. Although you do not all have young boys who are playing violent video games, this is a relatable topic for everyone because school violence is on the rise, as is public violence. I have done extensive research on video game ratings, misconceptions within the world of video games, as well as risk factors for aggressive behaviors. So today, I hope to prove that video game violence is in fact a risk factor for violent, sometimes even lethal behavior. And I hope to prove this by showing you the evolution of video games and how violent video games are connected with violence in the past and present. I will then show you 2 scientific studies which relate to violent video games. And I will end with a call to action and some redemptive solutions. First, let us examine the evolution of video games since the 60s, and let's look at some real-life evidence pertaining to violence in video games. Video games have truly evolved over the past half-century, and we've seen their negative effects in the past 2 decades. If you look at this timeline, attributed to Thomas and Levant in the Journal of Men's Studies, and Becker and Norberg in the Journal of Advertising, you'll see that Atari came out with the first video game in the 1960s, which was Pong. Then in the 1980s, Pac-Man came out, and ironically, parents believed that this was a violent video game. A few others are Doom in 1993, which was used to train military personnel, and this year Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, which could be one of the worst that we've had so far. Mike Jaccarino, a Fox News writer, wrote about the lives of a few men who have committed murder, and found that the tie between them all was that they all played violent video games. For example, Evan Ramsey killed 1 person and injured 2 others in 1997, and when asked why he did this, he said that he thought that people could regenerate like in his video games. Sung-Hung Cho, the murderer of Virginia Tech, killed 37 people in 2007 and also played violent video games. Breivik killed 77 people in Oslo, and when asked why, he said that he used Call of Duty as his training simulation for mass murder. Now that we've examined real-life evidence, let's look at some scientific studies pertaining to violent video games. The first was conducted by Thomas and Levant in 2012 and was published in the Journal of Men's Studies. 168 men were given 2 questionnaires, one to gauge whether or not they played violent video games, and the other to gauge if they were prone toward aggressive behaviors. The study found that males who endorse traditional masculine values are more likely to be affected by violent video games. So for example, if a young boy is playing violent video games and he believes that the common man is tough, aggressive, or violent, he will be more likely to be affected. The second study was conducted and published in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence by Boxer and other researchers, which tested 800 adolescents from all different backgrounds. Boxer explains that the current list of risk factors for aggression is the academic and emotional problems and being witnesses of aggression, but violent video games is nowhere on this list. This study found that risk factors must include violent video games because violent images directly correlate with violent acts. Now that we've looked at real-life circumstances and empirical evidence, let's consider some redemptive solutions. Obviously, violent video games does not promote that which God values. Dr. Albin, a communications professor at Liberty University, says, "God values human life, peace, and self-control. Violent video games does not go along with any of these 3 things." The first solution I would propose is that parents must become more involved in monitoring their child's play. Becker and Norberg published an article in the Journal of Advertising which explained that kids are becoming more and more calloused to violence, and parents are either too uninformed, too busy, or too confused with the world of video games to get involved. The second solution I would propose is that sellers must monitor who they're selling to. Target removed Manhunt 2 from their shelves in 2007. More companies need to take this initiative. The best solution that we have is awareness. Tell everyone you know the facts about violent video games and how they cause aggression in young kids. Now that we've looked at all of the evidence, let's review our social problem and our proposed solutions. A wave of violent video games is permeating our culture. What was once an innocent invention is now a catalyst for violence, and from the mouths of those committing these egregious acts, we know for a fact that violent video games does impact kids, teens, and adults alike. Research only proves to further this claim. The best solution that we have is to spread awareness, to take action and tell everyone we know. I will end with this quote by Dr. Gentile, a professor and psychologist at Iowa State University. He says, "There never is one cause. Whether it be violent video games, abuse as a child, doing drugs, being in a gang, not one of these is sufficient to cause aggression. But when you start putting them together, aggression becomes pretty predictable. Let's remove violent video games from this list of risk factors. While violent video games can't stand alone to cause violent behavior, it can add fuel to the fire of aggression. Let's quench that fire. Thank you.